The sound of a credit card machine beeping angrily cut through the air like a warning siren. Declined. The word flashed bright red on the screen, large enough for everyone standing nearby to see. The woman behind the counter didn't lower her voice. She raised it. Of course it's declined, she scoffed, folding her arms tightly across her chest. That's what happens when you people come in here thinking rules don't apply. The young black woman standing on the other side of the counter froze. Her name had not yet been spoken, her story had not yet been told, but already judgment had wrapped itself around her throat. I can explain, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. Please, I just need a few minutes. Someone is bringing the money, I promise. The antagonist laughed, a sharp, humiliating sound that echoed across the marble-floored lobby. A few minutes, she repeated mockingly. This isn't a charity shelter, this is a private facility. Cash first, no exceptions. The young woman's hands trembled as she clutched the worn strap of her handbag. Her knuckles were white. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for kindness, but finding only cameras, whispers, and cold stares. Phones were already raised. Someone near the back muttered, "Here we go again." Another whispered, "Why do they always cause scenes?" No one stepped forward. No one said enough. The antagonist leaned closer across the counter, lowering her voice just enough to make it sting more. "Let me guess," she said, eyes raking over the young woman's faded coat and scuffed shoes. "You thought if you cried a little, someone would feel sorry for you." The young woman swallowed hard. Her eyes shimmered, but she fought the tears like they were a crime. "I'm not asking for pity," she said quietly. "I'm asking for time. Someone could die if I leave." That did it. The antagonist slapped her palm on the counter so hard the sound cracked through the room. "Do not come in here and try to emotionally manipulate us," she snapped. "If you don't have the money, you don't belong here. Simple as that." A gasp rippled through the crowd. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve. A security guard shifted his weight but didn't move. A man in a suit shook his head and looked away. The young woman's lower lip trembled. She felt every eye on her skin, burning, measuring, judging. "This is why we have policies," the antagonist continued loudly, making sure everyone heard. "Because people like you think you can walk in and demand special treatment." "I didn't demand anything," the young woman said, her voice cracking now. "I begged." The word hung heavy in the air, begged. The antagonist rolled her eyes. "See," she said to the crowd, "always the same story." The humiliation was complete. The young woman's shoulders curled inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, less visible, less there. Her breath came fast and uneven. Tears finally spilled, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, ashamed of showing weakness in front of people who had already decided she didn't deserve dignity. That's when the antagonist said the words that would change everything. "Security," she called out sharply, without even looking away from the young woman. "Escort her out before she causes more trouble." A low murmur surged through the crowd. Someone whispered, "That's harsh." Someone else whispered, "She should have known better." Still no one intervened. The young woman looked toward the exit, her legs suddenly weak, her chest tight as if the air itself had turned against her. She had failed, and the cost of that failure wasn't embarrassment, it was life. Before security could take a single step, the young woman spoke again, softly, desperately. "Please," she said. "Just let me make one call." The antagonist laughed. "You've already wasted enough of our time." Then a calm, unfamiliar voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Something about the tone, steady, controlled, unshakable, forced the entire room into silence. Heads turned, phones lowered. The antagonist stiffened, irritation flashing across her face as she looked past the counter toward the source of the voice. A man stood a few steps behind the crowd, tall, composed. Dressed simply but impeccably. His eyes weren't on the antagonist. They were on the young woman, and there was something unsettling in his expression, not anger, not judgment, but recognition. Like he knew something no one else did. Before he could step forward, the young woman wiped her face again and whispered to herself, barely audible, "I just needed help." And that brings us to today's question of the day. Have you ever been judged, dismissed, or humiliated before anyone knew your full story? Do you believe people are treated differently based on how they look or where they come from? Tell us your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Because what the crowd didn't know, what the antagonist never imagined, was that the quiet stranger watching this unfold wasn't just another bystander. He was the last person she should have underestimated. And the truth he carried, it was about to turn this public humiliation into a reckoning no one would forget. But to understand how it all led to this moment, let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The morning began long before the sun rose. A soft gray light crept through the cracked window of a small apartment on the east side of the city, illuminating peeling paint, a sagging couch, and a threadbare rug that had once been bright red. The building groaned as pipes rattled awake, and somewhere down the hall, a baby cried before being hushed. On a narrow mattress near the window, Amara Johnson opened her eyes. She was 24 years old, but the weight she carried made her feel much older. Her body ached from too little sleep and too much worry, yet she rose without complaint, careful not to disturb the small form sleeping beside her. Her little brother, Micah, lay curled under a thin blanket, his breathing shallow and uneven. Even in sleep, his brow was furrowed, his lips dry and pale. A faint wheeze escaped his chest with every breath. Amara sat up slowly and reached out, brushing her fingers across his forehead. Warm, too warm, her heart clenched. "Hold on," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Just hold on a little longer." She swung her legs off the mattress and stood, her feet meeting the cold floor. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of an old clock and Micah's labored breathing. Their mother's bedroom door remained closed. Inside, Ruth Johnson slept fitfully, exhausted after another night shift at a diner that paid her barely enough to keep the lights on. Years of standing on swollen feet and swallowing insults from customers had worn her down, and now illness had joined the list of things stealing her strength. Amara moved through the apartment like a shadow. She filled a chipped kettle with water, set it on the stove, and leaned against the counter while it heated. Above her, cabinets hung crookedly, one held closed with tape. The refrigerator hummed loudly, mostly empty except for a half carton of milk, a few eggs, and a jar of mustard. This was her world, not one of abundance, but one of endurance. When the kettle whistled, Amara poured hot water into a mug and dropped in the last tea bag. She didn't drink it right away. Instead, she carried it back to the mattress and sat beside Micah, lifting his head gently so he could sip. "Easy," she murmured. "I've got you." Micah stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mara." He rasped. "I'm here," she said quickly, forcing a smile he couldn't quite see in the dim light. "How do you feel?" "Like my chest is on fire," he whispered. The words stabbed her. She nodded, keeping her voice steady. "I know, we're gonna fix that today, okay?" He searched her face with tired eyes, far too old for his 10 years. "Promise," Amara swallowed. "I promise," she said anyway. After Micah drifted back to sleep, Amara pulled on her clothes, dark jeans, a faded sweater, and the only coat she owned, its lining worn thin at the elbows. She tied her hair back neatly, even though no one ever seemed to notice. Dignity mattered to her, even when the world gave her none. Before leaving the room, she knelt briefly, pressing her forehead to the mattress. "Please," she thought, "just let me get through today." In the kitchen, Ruth emerged quietly, wrapping her robe tighter around herself. "You're up early," her mother said, her voice hoarse. Amara turned. "I didn't want to wake you." Ruth's eyes went immediately to the bedroom doorway. "How's Micah?" Amara hesitated for half a second too long. Ruth noticed. "He's worse," Ruth said softly. Amara nodded. "I'm taking him in today." Ruth's shoulders sagged. "Baby, we don't." "I know," Amara interrupted gently, "but we can't wait anymore." Ruth reached for her daughter's hands, her grip trembling. "You shouldn't have to carry this." Amara squeezed back. "He's my brother. That's not carrying, that's loving." Ruth's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Amara hated that. She hated that her mother felt like a burden. She hated that love came with price tags. She hated that survival always felt conditional. Before leaving, Amara slipped a folded eviction notice back into a drawer so Ruth wouldn't see it again. The date circled in red stared up at her like a countdown. 7 days. She tucked the thought away and focused on the now. Outside, the neighborhood was already stirring. Sirens wailed in the distance. A bus roared past, coughing black smoke. A man argued loudly with no one in particular on the corner. Amara held Micah close as they waited for the bus, his head resting against her shoulder, his breathing shallow. "You scared?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "So am I," she admitted. "But we're doing it together." When the bus arrived, the driver barely glanced at them. Amara paid in coins, apologizing when one slipped from her fingers and rolled away. She always apologized, for taking up space, for needing help, for existing too loudly. As the bus rattled toward the city center, Amara stared out the window at buildings growing taller, cleaner, colder. She pressed her lips together, determination hardening inside her. She didn't know what humiliation awaited her. She didn't know who would judge her. She didn't know how she would be treated. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would do anything to protect the people she loved. And that quiet strength, born from countless mornings just like this one, was the reason her story mattered, even if no one else could see it yet. The doctor didn't waste time softening the truth. Amara could tell by the way his mouth tightened before he spoke, by the way he avoided her eyes while flipping through Micah's chart. The exam room smelled of antiseptic and old paper, and the fluorescent lights above flickered just enough to make everything feel unstable, like the ground might give way at any moment. His asthma has progressed, the doctor said finally. This isn't something you can manage with home remedies anymore. Amara's chest tightened. What does that mean? She asked, though she already felt the answer pressing down on her ribs. It means, the doctor continued carefully, that without the medication I prescribed last month, his airways are continuing to narrow. Today's episode was serious. The next one could be life-threatening. Micah sat on the exam table, swinging his legs weakly, clutching Amara's sleeve. She wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. How much? She asked. The doctor hesitated. With the emergency consultation, tests, and the inhaler refill, today's total is $980. The number hit her like a physical blow, nearly $1,000. Amara blinked once, twice, trying to force her mind to work. I don't have insurance, she said quickly, but I can pay something. I just need time. The doctor sighed, rubbing his forehead. I understand, but the pharmacy won't release the medication without full payment, and the hospital requires a deposit before administering the long-acting treatment. How much is the deposit? She asked, her voice already shaking. $500 today. Silence swallowed the room. Micah looked up at her, his eyes wide. Mara, am I gonna be okay? She forced a smile that felt like glass cutting into her cheeks. Of course you are, don't worry. But inside, panic was screaming. $500. Amara mentally counted everything she had. Her last paycheck, already gone to rent and utilities. Her savings, $72. Her mother's tips from the diner, barely enough for groceries. Credit cards maxed out long ago. There was no one left to call. She had already tried. That morning, before leaving the apartment, she had called her aunt in another state, no answer. She had texted an old friend who was barely surviving herself. She had swallowed her pride and asked her manager at the grocery store where she worked part-time for an advance. He said no, everyone had. Isn't there some kind of assistance? Amara asked, desperation seeping into her voice. A payment plan. Anything? The doctor's eyes softened, but his answer didn't. You can apply, he said gently, but approvals take weeks, sometimes months. Micah began to cough, a sharp, frightening sound that echoed off the walls. Amara's heart leapt into her throat. She stood so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Please, she said, her voice cracking. He can't wait weeks. The doctor stood too, placing a hand on Micah's shoulder. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry, the word felt empty. They were escorted out of the exam room into the waiting area, where people sat scrolling on phones, sipping coffee, living lives untouched by the moment Amara's world had begun to collapse. At the billing counter, a woman with a perfectly pressed blazer slid a paper across the desk. Deposit required before treatment, she said flatly. Cash or card? Amara stared at the paper. It might as well have been written in another language. I don't have it, Amara said quietly. The woman's lips tightened. Then I'm afraid we can't proceed. Micah clutched Amara's coat. Mara, it hurts. That was it. The sound of her brother's pain shattered something inside her. Please, Amara said, tears spilling freely now. Just give us a little time. I'll get the money, I swear. The woman looked past her, already calling for the next patient. Dismissed. Invisible. Amara guided Micah outside, her legs numb, her head spinning. The cold air hit her face, and for a moment she couldn't breathe, not from asthma, but from fear. She leaned against the hospital wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the pavement, pulling Micah into her lap. I'm sorry, she whispered into his hair. I'm so sorry. I'm tired, Micah murmured. Her arms tightened around him. No, she couldn't let this happen. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Hope flared, brief and blinding. She pulled it out with shaking hands, a text from her landlord. Rent overdue, final notice. Her vision blurred. She stared at the screen until the letters swam, then locked the phone and pressed it to her forehead. She had nothing left, nothing except one last, terrifying option. Across the street, rising like a fortress of glass and steel, stood the Ridgeway Medical Pavilion, a private high-end medical center known for its cutting-edge treatments and impossibly high fees. The kind of place where people didn't wait. The kind of place where money spoke louder than pain. Amara had never set foot inside. She had walked past it dozens of times, always averting her eyes, knowing she didn't belong there. But today, belonging didn't matter. Only survival did. She stood, lifting Micah carefully into her arms despite the ache in her back and the tremor in her hands. Where are we going? Micah asked weakly. Somewhere better, she lied softly. Each step toward the building felt heavier than the last. Her mind raced with fear. They'll laugh at you. They'll turn you away. They'll judge you before you open your mouth. She already knew how people looked at her clothes, her skin, her exhaustion. She had lived that reality her whole life, but what choice did she have? She paused across the street, staring up at the gleaming entrance where uniformed staff moved efficiently, where people in tailored coats walked without fear. This was the place where dignity came with a price. Amara hugged Micah tighter. "I love you," she whispered. And with that, she made the painful decision she had been avoiding all day. She would walk into a world that had never wanted her. She would risk humiliation, judgment, and rejection. Because walking away meant something far worse. It meant losing him, and that was not an option. The automatic doors opened with a soft, polished hiss. Amara stood just outside the entrance of the Ridgeway Medical Pavilion, her reflection staring back at her from the glass, tired eyes, worn coat, a child clinging weakly to her shoulder. Behind the reflection, the lobby gleamed like another world entirely. White marble floors, tall glass walls, soft instrumental music drifting through hidden speakers. Everything about the place whispered the same message: you do not belong here. Amara's heart pounded so loudly she was sure the people inside could hear it. She adjusted Micah's weight in her arms, feeling how light he had become, how fragile. His breathing rattled softly against her neck, each shallow inhale a reminder that time was slipping through her fingers. "It's okay," she whispered to him, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "We're just going to ask." Just ask. She had learned long ago how dangerous those words could be. As she stepped inside, warmth wrapped around her like an accusation. The cold of the street vanished, replaced by the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. Her worn shoes squeaked faintly against the marble floor, the sound too loud in the hushed space. Heads turned, not openly, not obviously, but she felt it. The glances that slid toward her and away just as quickly. The subtle tightening of lips, the quick assessments, clothes, posture, skin, child. Judgment didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered. She moved forward slowly, her steps cautious, as if the floor itself might reject her. On either side of the lobby sat plush seating areas where well-dressed families waited calmly, sipping bottled water, scrolling through phones. No one held a child the way she did. No one looked afraid. Amara approached the reception desk, her palms damp, her mouth dry. The counter gleamed. The woman behind it looked equally polished, hair sleek, makeup flawless, posture rigid with authority. She glanced up, her smile already fading before Amara had even spoken. "Yes," the receptionist said, her tone clipped. Amara swallowed. "Hi, my brother needs help. He has asthma and his condition is getting worse. The other hospital couldn't—" "Insurance," the woman interrupted. "I don't have it," Amara admitted. "But I can pay, just not all at once. I was hoping." The receptionist's eyes flicked to Micah, then back to Amara, cool and measuring. "Our policy requires full payment before treatment," she said. "No exceptions." Amara nodded quickly. "I understand. I just need a little time. I'm waiting on someone. They're bringing money." The receptionist's lips pressed into a thin line. "How much do you have now?" she asked. Amara opened her bag with trembling hands and counted out the bills and coins she carried, carefully saved, carefully guarded. $72, she said softly. The number sounded ridiculous in the vastness of the lobby. The receptionist let out a small, humorless laugh. "That won't even cover the intake fee," she said. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to leave." The word leave landed like a shove. Amara felt heat rush to her face. "Please," she said again. "He can't breathe properly. Just let a doctor look at him." The receptionist shook her head. "Policies exist for a reason." Around them, the lobby seemed to grow quieter. Amara sensed it before she saw it, the way people had begun to pay attention. A man in a tailored suit glanced over his newspaper. A woman with diamond earrings leaned toward her companion, whispering. Fear curled tighter around Amara's heart. She hated this part, hated being seen like this. "I'm not asking for free care," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I'm asking for a chance." The receptionist straightened, her voice growing louder. "And I'm telling you we cannot help you without payment. You need to step aside. You're holding up the line." There was no line. Amara's throat burned. She looked down at Micah, who was coughing now, his small body shaking. "Please," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "I'll do anything." That was when the receptionist's patience snapped. "Security may be needed," she said sharply, reaching for a button beneath the desk. The room felt like it tilted. Amara took a step back, instinctively shielding Micah with her body. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble." She turned, her legs heavy, her chest tight, the humiliation already seeping in like poison. This was what she had feared, being turned away not quietly, but publicly. She moved toward the center of the lobby, unsure where to go, her mind spinning. Then a cough, not Micah S. An older man near the seating area watched her with furrowed brows. A young woman lowered her phone, unease flickering across her face. A few people shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to see. Still no one spoke. Amara reached the edge of the lobby and stopped. The doors loomed ahead. Leaving meant giving up. Staying meant being torn apart piece by piece. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and turned back toward the desk. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. The receptionist looked up, startled. "I just need 5 minutes," Amara continued, her voice trembling but firm. "If I can't get the money, I'll go, I promise." For a brief moment, hope flickered. Then the receptionist's expression hardened. "That's not how this works," she said coldly. "You people always think rules bend for you." The words hit like a slap. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Amara froze, her heart pounded in her ears. This was it. The moment fear had been warning her about since she left home. The moment judgment turned into cruelty. She stood there, exposed, shaking, as whispers grew louder and eyes fixed on her. And somewhere behind the crowd, unnoticed by most, a quiet figure had stopped walking. Watching, listening, and beginning to understand exactly what was happening. Amara took one final breath and stepped fully into the fire. The receptionist's words hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. "You people always think rules bend for you." A few gasps escaped the crowd, not loud enough to be brave, not strong enough to stop anything. Just enough to acknowledge that a line had been crossed. Amara felt as if the floor beneath her had vanished. Her ears rang. Her pulse thudded painfully in her throat. For a split second, she wondered if she had imagined it, if humiliation had finally warped her hearing. But then she saw the looks. Some faces showed discomfort. Others showed agreement. Most showed nothing at all. Micah coughed again, a harsh, wet sound that made Amara flinch. She tightened her grip on him. "Please," she said, her voice breaking openly now. "He's a child, just look at him." The receptionist leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Ma'am," she said loudly, deliberately, "this is a private medical facility. If you can't meet the financial requirements, you need to take your situation somewhere else." Somewhere else, as if sickness cared about zip codes, as if pain respected price tags. "I tried somewhere else," Amara said, tears spilling freely now. "They turned us away too." "That's not our problem," the receptionist replied. "And you're disturbing other patients." Amara looked around desperately. At the woman clutching a designer bag, at the man scrolling through his phone, at the elderly couple watching with tight, uneasy smiles. "Please," she said to them, not the desk. "Does anyone know of a place that can help?" No one answered. A man cleared his throat, then looked away. A woman shook her head slightly, lips pressed thin. Someone lifted their phone higher, framing the moment. The silence was brutal. It pressed down on Amara harder than the insults. The receptionist stood up. "That's it," she said sharply. "I've been patient long enough. Security." Her voice carried authority, trained, practiced, unquestioned. A uniformed guard near the entrance straightened and began walking toward Amara. Panic surged. "Wait," Amara said quickly, stepping back. "Please don't." "Ma'am," the guard said, not unkindly but firmly, "you need to leave." Micah whimpered, his arms tightening around Amara's neck. "I don't feel good," he whispered. That was the sound that broke her. Amara's knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself on the edge of a chair. "Please," she said again, barely able to speak through sobs now. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, I just need help." The receptionist scoffed. "If you didn't want trouble, you should have known better than to come in here without money." The words landed with surgical precision, each one cut. A man near the desk murmured, "This is uncomfortable." Another replied, "She should have thought this through." Amara felt stripped bare, every struggle, every failure, every moment of poverty, all of it laid out and judged by strangers who would forget her by dinner. She lowered her head, ashamed, not because she had done something wrong, but because the world had taught her that needing help was something to apologize for. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The apology came automatically, reflexively, the way it always did. She turned slightly toward the exit, her shoulders sagging, her spirit fraying. That's when the receptionist delivered the final blow. "Next time," she said loudly, ensuring the whole lobby heard, "don't bring your problems where you can't afford the solution." The crowd shifted uneasily. Someone muttered, "That's cold." But still no one intervened. Amara took a step, then another. Each step felt like surrender. She had failed Micah. That thought echoed endlessly in her mind. Failed him. Her vision blurred so badly she almost didn't notice when a calm, steady voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." The guard stopped mid-step. The receptionist froze, irritation flashing across her face as she looked up. "Excuse me," she snapped. The voice came again, closer now. "I said that's enough." The crowd parted slightly as a man stepped forward. He was tall, dressed simply in a dark coat and pressed slacks. No flashy jewelry, no visible arrogance, just quiet confidence and eyes that missed nothing. He looked first at Micah, then at Amara. His expression softened, not with pity, but with understanding. "Are you okay?" He asked her gently. Amara was so stunned she couldn't answer. The receptionist recovered quickly. "Sir," she said sharply, "this does not concern you." He turned to her calmly. "It concerns anyone with a conscience," he replied. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The receptionist straightened, clearly annoyed. "We're handling a disruption. Please step aside." The man didn't move. "Handling," he repeated, "by humiliating a desperate mother and a sick child." Amara flinched at the word mother, but she didn't correct him. Right now, it didn't matter. The receptionist's face hardened. "Sir, if you continue interfering, I'll have security remove you as well." The man glanced at the guard, then back at her. "I'd like to see you try," he said quietly. Something in his tone gave the guard pause. The receptionist scoffed. "You think you're special?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt slightly to Micah's level, careful, respectful. "What's your name?" he asked. Micah blinked, startled. Micah." "And how are you feeling, Micah?" "Bad," he whispered. The man nodded slowly, jaw tightening. He stood and faced the receptionist again. "This child needs care," he said evenly. "Right now," the receptionist laughed. "And unless you're paying, that's not happening." The man's eyes didn't leave hers. "I will," he said. Amara gasped softly. "I'll cover everything," he continued. "Every test, every treatment, right now." The room erupted into whispers. The receptionist hesitated just for a fraction of a second, then regained her composure. "That's generous," she said, suspicious. "But we still have procedures." "Procedures don't excuse cruelty," the man replied. The receptionist crossed her arms. "You don't know how things work here." The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Oh," he said calmly, "I know exactly how things work here." The air shifted. Something was changing, but the receptionist didn't realize it yet. She had no idea who she was talking to, and the reckoning was only just beginning. For a brief moment, hope dared to rise. Amara felt it, fragile and dangerous, as the stranger's words settled into the air. "I'll cover everything." Her breath caught. Her knees trembled. She tightened her arms around Micah as if the promise itself might slip away if she loosened her grip. But the receptionist didn't soften. If anything, she grew colder. "This isn't about money anymore," the receptionist said sharply, her eyes narrowing at the man. "This woman has caused a scene. She's disrupted our facility and disturbed paying clients." Paying clients, the emphasis was unmistakable. Amara's hope collapsed in on itself. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly, her voice small, ashamed. "I swear I didn't mean to," she stopped, her throat closing. Why was she apologizing again? The stranger turned toward her, concern deepening in his eyes. "You have nothing to apologize for." But the damage was already done. The receptionist waved a dismissive hand. "Sir, you're being emotionally manipulated. This happens all the time. They come in with stories, hoping someone will feel sorry for them." The word landed heavier than any insult so far. A few people in the crowd nodded subtly. Others shifted, uncomfortable but silent. The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said to Amara, more firmly now, "I really need you to come with me." Micah's breathing hitched. "No," he whispered. "Please don't make us go." Amara's heart shattered. She looked down at him, at his flushed face, at the fear swimming in his eyes, and something inside her finally broke. She shook her head slowly. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him. "I tried." Tears streamed freely, now unstoppable. Her shoulders shook as sobs tore their way out of her chest. "I tried so hard," she murmured. "I really did." The lobby felt impossibly large, impossibly quiet. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. The stranger opened his mouth to say something, but the receptionist cut him off. "Security," she snapped, her voice echoing. "Now." The guard stepped closer. Amara took one step back, then another. Her heel caught on the edge of the marble floor, and she nearly stumbled. The crowd sucked in a collective breath, but still no one helped. She steadied herself and lowered Micah carefully to his feet. "Hold my hand," she said softly. His fingers were cold, weak. She bent slightly, bringing her forehead to his. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I'm so sorry." Micah shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "It's not your fault." That was the moment, when a 10-year-old child had to comfort the adult holding him. Amara straightened slowly, wiping her face with trembling hands. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked, her dignity hanging by a thread. She turned toward the exit, toward defeat, toward the terrifying unknown that waited outside those doors. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Just please don't touch him." The guard hesitated, then nodded. She took one step. The receptionist exhaled sharply, as if relieved. "Thank you," she said. "Finally!" The word finally echoed cruelly in Amara's ears. She felt smaller than she ever had in her life. Poor, powerless, invisible. This was rock bottom. Not the lack of money, not the sickness, not even the eviction notice waiting at home. Was this moment, standing in a room full of people, knowing that if she disappeared, the world would barely notice. Her vision blurred as she reached for the door, and then, no. The word was quiet, but it carried weight, enough to stop her mid-step. The stranger's voice again, calm, controlled, unyielding. "No," he repeated. "This ends now." The receptionist turned sharply. "Sir, I've warned you." He raised one hand, not aggressively, but with finality. "I'm not asking," he said. The guard paused, uncertain. The crowd leaned in, tension thickening like a storm about to break. The stranger stepped forward until he stood beside Amara, close enough that she could feel the steady calm radiating from him. "You are not leaving," he said gently to her. "Not today." Amara shook her head weakly. "Please, don't make this worse." He looked at her then, really looked, not at her clothes, not at her exhaustion, but at her strength, her fear, her love for the child gripping her hand. "I promise you," he said softly, "this is about to get better." The receptionist laughed sharply. "You're delusional." The man turned to her slowly. "You've had every opportunity to do the right thing," he said evenly. "You chose cruelty instead." Her smile faltered for the first time. "You don't scare me," she snapped. "You're nobody." The man didn't flinch. He simply reached into his coat pocket, not for a wallet, not for a credit card, but for something else entirely. The room held its breath. Amara didn't know what was happening. She only knew that the silence, once so heavy it crushed her, had shifted. It was no longer empty. It was waiting. The stranger didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He didn't threat. And somehow that made him more powerful than anyone in the room. He stood between Amara and the exit, not blocking her, but shielding her, his posture relaxed, his hands visible, his presence steady like an anchor dropped into chaos. The receptionist scoffed. "Sir, whatever you think you're doing, you're out of line." He looked at her calmly. "What I'm doing," he said, "is stopping abuse." A ripple moved through the crowd. The word abuse landed differently than disruption. It reframed everything. The receptionist's face flushed. "This is a business," she snapped. "We have rules, and if you don't like them, you're free to leave." The man tilted his head slightly. "Rules are meant to serve people," he replied, "not humiliate them." Amara stood frozen beside him, her heart racing. No one had ever spoken like this for her before. Not teachers, not managers, not neighbors. People usually looked at her struggles and stepped around them. This man had stepped in. Micah squeezed her hand. "Mara," he whispered. "Who is he?" She shook her head faintly. "I don't know." The stranger glanced down at Micah again, his eyes softening. "What's your favorite superhero?" he asked gently. Micah blinked, confused by the sudden normalcy. "Uh, Black Panther," the man smiled. "Good choice, he protects people too." Micah managed the smallest smile. The receptionist slammed her palm on the desk. "That's enough, you're distracting us from doing our jobs." The man straightened slowly and faced her fully now. "No," he said calmly, "you're distracting yourself from yours." A sharp intake of breath swept the lobby. The guard shifted uncomfortably, his hand hovering near his radio. "Sir," he said cautiously, "if you don't step aside." The man turned to him, his expression respectful. "You're just doing what you were told, I understand." The guard hesitated. No one ever spoke to him like that either. The man turned back to the receptionist. "Let me be very clear," he said evenly. "This child is in medical distress. Turning him away violates not just ethical standards, but legal ones." The receptionist laughed nervously. "Are you a lawyer now?" The man met her gaze. "I don't need to be to recognize cruelty." Amara felt something stir in her chest, not hope, something stronger, validation. For the first time all day, someone was saying out loud what she had been forced to swallow in silence. The receptionist crossed her arms, trying to regain control. "You're making a lot of noise for someone who doesn't matter here." The man smiled faintly. "That's an interesting assumption," he said. The receptionist rolled her eyes. "Security," she snapped again, louder this time. "Escort both of them out." The guard took one step forward, then stopped. I need confirmation," he said uncertainly. The receptionist stared at him. "What policy?" he said, avoiding her eyes. "When there's a dispute involving a medical emergency, we're supposed to escalate to administration." Her jaw tightened. "Fine," she snapped. "Call them." She turned back to the man triumphantly. "You hear that? This will be sorted properly." The man nodded. "Good." That answer unsettled her. Administration would back her. They always did. She glanced at Amara with thinly veiled contempt. "Don't get comfortable," she said. "This won't change anything." Amara lowered her eyes instinctively, but then the man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was light, respectful, reassuring. "Look at me," he said softly. She hesitated, then did. His eyes were calm, unwavering. "You have done nothing wrong," he said. "Not once, not today, not ever." Her breath hitched. Tears welled again, but these felt different. "They made me feel like I was less," she whispered. He shook his head. "They're wrong." The simplicity of it nearly broke her. The receptionist scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're filling her head with nonsense." The man turned slowly. "What's ridiculous," he said, "is watching someone with power use it to demean someone without it." A hush fell. Even the receptionist sensed something slipping. "Who do you think you are?" she demanded. "Walking in here like you own the place?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket again. This time, he pulled out a slim leather card holder. Not flashy, not dramatic. He opened it, but didn't hand anything over yet. "Before we continue," he said calmly, "I'd like you to call administration." "They're already on their way," she snapped. "Good," he replied. "Make sure they bring the regional director." The receptionist frowned. "Why would I do that?" "Because," he said evenly, "this situation will require it." The crowd leaned in. Whispers surged. "Who is he? Why is he so calm? He doesn't sound scared at all." The receptionist laughed, brittle now. "You're bluffing." The man met her gaze without blinking. "I don't bluff." The guard's radio crackled. "Admin on the way," a voice said. "2 minutes out." The receptionist exhaled sharply, straightening her blazer. She shot Amara a final glare. "This won't end the way you think," she said coldly. Amara said nothing. She was too busy trying to understand why, for the first time since entering the building, she didn't feel completely alone. The man leaned slightly toward her. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "remember this moment." She frowned faintly. "Why?" "Because," he said, eyes forward, "this is the last time anyone here will ever speak to you like that." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from the hallway behind the desk. Important footsteps, confident ones. The receptionist's posture snapped to attention as 2 sharply dressed administrators approached. Relief flashed across her face. The cavalry had arrived. She gestured dramatically toward Amara and the man. "These are the individuals causing the disruption," she said quickly. "They refused to leave." One of the administrators looked at the man, then stopped. His expression changed. Color drained from his face. The other administrator followed his gaze and froze. The man closed the card holder slowly. Not yet, not quite yet, but the air had changed again, this time for good. Amara felt it in her bones. Whatever truth this stranger carried, it was about to be revealed, and it would leave nothing the same. The administrators stopped walking, not slowly, not cautiously, abruptly, as if they had run headfirst into an invisible wall. The taller of the two, a man with silver hair and an immaculate suit, stared at the stranger as though he were seeing a ghost. His mouth opened, then closed again. His hand twitched at his side. The second administrator, a woman clutching a tablet to her chest, followed his gaze. Her eyes widened. "Oh," she whispered. The receptionist noticed. Her confident posture faltered. "What?" she demanded. "What is it?" Neither administrator answered her. They were still looking at the man. The stranger gave them a small, polite nod. "Good afternoon," he said calmly. "I asked for the regional director." The silver-haired man swallowed hard. Yes," he stammered. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore, we didn't realize you were on site today." The name hit the lobby like thunder. A ripple of confusion swept through the crowd. "Whitmore?" someone whispered. "Did he say Whitmore?" "No way, that Whitmore?" The receptionist's smile froze. "Mr. Who?" she asked sharply, her voice suddenly thin. The man turned to her slowly. "Daniel Whitmore," he said evenly. "Founder and majority benefactor of the Ridgeway Medical Network." Silence, not a whisper. Not a breath. The receptionist's face drained of color so fast it was as if someone had pulled a plug. That's not funny," she said weakly. "You can't just say." "I can," he replied, "and I just did." The silver-haired administrator stepped forward quickly, his voice tight with panic. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, bowing his head slightly, "this is a misunderstanding. We were not informed." Daniel raised a hand. "Stop," he said quietly. The word carried absolute authority. The administrator stopped mid-sentence. Daniel turned back to the receptionist. "Please," he said calmly, "explain to me why a child in respiratory distress was denied care in a facility whose mission statement begins with the words compassion without condition." The receptionist opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her eyes darted to the administrators, then to the guard, then to the watching crowd. Phones were up again, but now they weren't recording Amara. They were recording her. "I was following policy," she stammered. "They didn't have payment and she was causing a scene." Daniel's gaze sharpened. A scene, he repeated. He gestured toward Amara and Micah. This woman asked for help, he said. You humiliated her, you made assumptions, you used language that suggested she was less deserving of dignity. He took a step closer. And you did it loudly. The receptionist's knees visibly shook. I didn't know who you were, she blurted out. Daniel's expression didn't change. That, he said, is the problem. A collective murmur surged through the lobby. Amara stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up. Founder, benefactor, owner. Her gaze slid to Daniel, this calm, kind stranger who had knelt to talk to Micah, who had stood between her and the exit. Her breath caught. Micah tugged her sleeve. Mara, he whispered, all creeping into his voice, is he like the boss of the whole place? She nodded faintly, tears burning her eyes. I think so. Daniel turned to the administrators. How long, he asked evenly, has this been going on? The woman with the tablet swallowed. We will investigate immediately. No, Daniel said. You won't investigate later, you'll address it now. He gestured toward the receptionist. This employee used discriminatory language, escalated a medical emergency, and attempted to have a sick child removed. What do your protocols say? The silver-haired man's voice trembled. Immediate suspension pending review. Daniel nodded. Good. The receptionist gasped. You can't do this. Daniel looked at her with calm finality. I can, he said, and I am. He turned to the guard. Please escort her to HR. The guard hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Yes, sir. As the guard approached, the receptionist's composure shattered completely. You don't understand, she cried. I was just doing my job. Daniel met her gaze one last time. No, he said. You were abusing your power. She was led away, her heels clicking frantically against the marble, her earlier arrogance replaced by panic and disbelief. The lobby remained silent as the doors closed behind her. Then Daniel turned back to Amara. Everything about his posture softened. I'm sorry, he said gently, for what you were put through. Amara shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't know, I would never have. He raised a hand kindly. You shouldn't have needed to know. Her shoulders shook as the tears finally came, deep, silent sobs she had been holding back all day. I just wanted help, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause. You didn't, Daniel said firmly. You did exactly what a loving sister should do. He turned to the administrators. Get this child into treatment immediately, no paperwork, no delays. Yes, sir, they said in unison. A nurse appeared within seconds, her expression urgent and apologetic. We're ready for him, she said gently to Amara. Micah looked up at Daniel. Are you really gonna help me? Daniel smiled. Absolutely. As the nurse guided Micah away, Amara hesitated, panic flaring again. Wait, she said. I can't pay. Daniel met her eyes. You don't owe us anything, he said softly. But we owe you an apology. Her legs nearly gave out. The crowd began to stir, whispers no longer cruel but stunned. I can't believe they treated her like that. That was the owner. She didn't deserve any of this. Daniel turned to the room. I hope everyone here remembers what they saw today, he said calmly. Silence protects cruelty, compassion stops it. No one looked away. Amara stood there, trembling as reality finally sank in. The man who had saved her brother, the man who had seen her when no one else did, he hadn't arrived by accident. He had arrived exactly when everything seemed lost. And in that moment, standing in the same lobby where she had been stripped of dignity, Amara felt something new bloom inside her. Not relief, not gratitude, but justice. The treatment room was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of medical equipment. Micah lay on the bed, a soft mask fitted over his face as medication flowed into his lungs. His breathing, once shallow and strained, slowly began to deepen. Each steady inhale felt like a small miracle. Amara stood beside him, one hand resting on the bed rail, the other pressed to her mouth as tears slid down her cheeks. He's going to be okay, she told herself. He has to be okay. A nurse adjusted the IV and offered Amara a gentle smile. He responded quickly, You did the right thing bringing him here. Amara nodded, unable to speak. Outside the room, through the glass wall, Daniel Whitmore stood with the administrators. His calm expression hadn't changed, but the tone of the conversation had. This is not a training issue, Daniel said evenly. This is a values issue. The silver-haired administrator nodded repeatedly. We understand her employment has been terminated effective immediately. A formal apology will be issued and will be reviewing staff conduct across all branches. Good, Daniel replied. And the security footage? It's being preserved, the woman with the tablet said. For legal review. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Make sure it is. The receptionist's consequences were swift. By the end of the hour, her access badge was deactivated, her desk cleared, and HR had begun formal proceedings for discriminatory misconduct. The video circulating online, once meant to shame Amara, now told a very different story. One of abuse, one of accountability, and it was spreading fast. Daniel turned away from the administrators and walked back toward Amara. She noticed him through the glass and quickly wiped her face, embarrassed by her tears. He knocked softly before entering the room. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. "I just wanted to check on you," he said gently. "And Micah?" "He's breathing better," she said, her voice unsteady. "Thank you, I don't know how to—" "You don't have to," Daniel interrupted kindly. "This isn't charity, this is responsibility," she frowned slightly. "Responsibility? Yes," he said. "I built this network to help people. When it fails someone this badly, I need to know, and I need to fix it." Amara looked down at Micah, then back at Daniel. "People like me, we don't usually get fixes." Daniel studied her for a moment. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I was here today," she blinked. "You were," he nodded. "I visit unannounced sometimes. I want to see how things really work when no one thinks they're being watched." Her breath caught. "So if you hadn't been here," Daniel didn't answer immediately. "Then today would have ended very differently," he said softly. The truth of that settled heavily between them. Amara's hands trembled. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I thought I was losing him." Daniel's voice softened even more. "You almost did, not because of his illness, but because of indifference." Tears spilled again, but this time they came with relief. After Micah was stabilized, a social worker arrived, followed by a financial counselor, then a physician specializing in long-term asthma care. Amara watched in disbelief as doors she had been pushing against for years opened effortlessly. Daniel spoke with quiet authority. "Micah will receive ongoing treatment here," he said. "All expenses covered, medication, therapy, follow-ups." Amara shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't accept all this." "Yes, you can," he said gently. "And you should," she hesitated. "Why?" Daniel met her gaze. "Because needing help is not a moral failure." Words hit her harder than anything that had happened all day. "What about my mom?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's sick too, and we're about to lose our apartment." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know," she stiffened. "You know. I had my team look into your situation," he said. "With your permission," she exhaled shakily. "Okay. Your family will be moved into stable housing by the end of the week," he continued. "Your mother will receive medical care, and you—" He paused. "You shouldn't be working part-time while carrying this much alone," he said. "You're smart, resilient. Have you ever considered going back to school?" Amara stared at him. "School," she echoed. "I had to drop out." "Then we'll help you return," Daniel said simply. "Tuition covered, support in place." Her knees nearly buckled. "This is too much," she whispered. "I don't deserve—" Daniel shook his head firmly. "Stop." She looked up, startled. "You don't earn dignity," he said. "You're born with it." Silence filled the room. Micah stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mara," he murmured. She rushed to his side, taking his hand. "I'm here," he smiled faintly. "I can breathe." She laughed through tears, pressing her forehead to his. Daniel watched quietly, giving them space. Before leaving, he turned back to Amara. "One more thing," he said. "Yes. I'd like you to consider working with us one day," he said. "Not as a favor, as a partner, someone who understands what people face when systems fail." She blinked. "Me," he nodded. "You see what others ignore, that matters." For the first time in years, Amara didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through wide windows instead of cracked glass. Amara stood in the kitchen of a bright, modest home on a quiet tree-lined street, the smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filling the air. Laughter echoed from the living room, real laughter, unburdened, the kind that didn't brace itself for disappointment. "Mom, you're going to be late," Micah called out, his voice strong now, full of life. Amara smiled. She still wasn't used to hearing that word applied to her so naturally, not because she wasn't proud of it, but because it reminded her how far they had come. "I know," she called back. "Finish your homework." Micah appeared in the doorway, taller than she remembered him being just a moment ago, inhaler clipped to his backpack but rarely needed anymore. "You're speaking today, right?" he asked. She nodded. "At the clinic, orientation for new staff," he grinned. "Don't forget to tell them you scared the billionaire," she laughed, shaking her head. "I didn't scare anyone." "You totally did," he insisted, then darted off as Ruth called him from the hallway. Ruth, healthier now, stronger. Her laugh, once rare, had become a daily sound in their home. Amara grabbed her bag and paused by the front door, taking in the framed photographs lining the wall. Micah at his middle school graduation, Ruth smiling beside a doctor she trusted, and one photo she never moved, a candid shot from the clinic lobby years ago. Daniel Whitmore standing slightly behind her, one hand resting protectively on Micah's shoulder, not as a savior, as an ally. The Ridgeway Medical Pavilion looked different now. The marble floors remained, the glass still gleamed, but the atmosphere had changed. Posters lined the walls, each one featuring real patients, real stories, real reminders, care first, always. Amara walked through the lobby with confidence, her steps steady, her posture tall. Staff greeted her by name, some smiled, some nodded respectfully. She stopped briefly at the reception desk. A new receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, looked up. "Good morning, Dr. Johnson," she said warmly. Amara returned the smile. "Good morning." She still felt a quiet awe every time she heard the title. Social work and public health had not been easy, late nights, hard truths, emotional weight, but she had chosen it deliberately because she remembered what it felt like to stand on the other side of that counter. In the orientation room, new hires sat quietly as Amara stepped to the front. She scanned their faces, eager, nervous, untested. "I want to tell you a story," she began. From a textbook, from real life. She told them about a morning that started in fear, about a boy who couldn't breathe, about silence that hurt more than words, and about one moment, one choice that changed everything. "Compassion," she said, her voice steady, "is not an extra, it's the job." The room was silent when she finished. Then someone stood and applauded, others followed. Later that afternoon, as Amara walked past the lobby, she noticed a woman standing hesitantly near the desk. Worn coat. Nervous eyes, a child clinging to her side. The familiar ache tightened in Amara's chest. She didn't hesitate. She walked over, knelt to the child's level, and smiled gently. "Hi," she said. "I'm Amara. How can we help today?" The woman's eyes filled with tears, this time not from humiliation but relief. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore watched quietly, a small smile touching his lips. He never took credit. He never needed to. Because the real victory wasn't in the power he used, but in the power he passed on. And so the story ends not with wealth or authority or punishment, but with humanity. Because you never know who someone is or what they carry until you choose to see them. Because kindness costs nothing, but can change everything. And because the moment you decide to treat someone with dignity may become the moment that saves a life. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion matters, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life inspired stories. Thank you for watching. And remember, how you treat people when you think no one important is watching matters the most.